how to make sure that you maximise your damage. A lot of the time, newer players to the game will have all of the equipment that they need. They have a powerful weapon, a good armour set, and a more than good enough pet, although still disappointed with the damaging figures. But how could this be? Well, there's more to maximising your damage than just having a good weapon, a decent armour set, and a good pet. In reality, they're just the basics. Now, the accessory system was changed a while ago. Of course, now power stones are in the game. It's nothing new, it's just difficult for some people to understand. To put it simply, the more accessories you have, the more magical power you will have. The more magical power you have, the more of a buff that your power stone gives. For example, with my current magical power of 1192, the buffs that I get from the Hurtful Power Stone are plus 176 strength and plus 704 crit damage. If I was to go into my accessory bag and remove a few, so we have less magical power, we'll see how that is actually affecting our power. Okay, now we have 928 magical power, and as you can see, the buffs that we get from the Power Stone have decreased. We now only get 147 strength and 587 crit damage, which obviously translates into less damage. However, it doesn't stop there. There's still a ton of factors that affect your damage. For example, the reforge on your armor set, the reforge on your weapon, your bonus attack speed, if you have a god potion active or not, the enchantments on your weapon. The list literally goes on and on and on. If you are planning on buying anything from the Hypixel store, make sure to use code NITROS, it gets yourself 5% off. You should also subscribe to the channel and become part of the 30%. Make sure to join the Discord server, it's linked in the description of every single video. Now, if I'm being completely honest, a very important factor in maximising your damage is choosing the correct power stone for you. And obviously this will change depending on what setup you're actually using. Now when it comes to melee damage, I usually use the Hurtful Power Stone, which basically requires you to have 9 Magma Urchins and then go over to Maxwell and combine them and get the power up. As you can see, when you actually look at the buffs that it actually does give you, it's massively crit damage heavy. Which means that the ratio from crit damage to strength is massively in the favour of crit damage. This can be useful with certain setups, for example weapons that give you a lot of strength. This is a really nice power stone to counteract that. So let's say for example I'm using a Ragnarok axe. Most people don't, and usually it's just used as a sort of an accessory to do more damage with other weapons, but let's say we're actually using this weapon to do damage. Okay, I have my armor set, I've got a golden dragon on, and if we hold our weapon and then click onto our Skyblock menu and then hover over our head, okay, we can see we have 1414 strength, and then we have 1295 crit damage. In most walks of Skyblock, your aim is to balance these two figures out. And in a situation like this where you have a very strength heavy weapon, accompanied with a very strength heavy pet, it might seem like this is relatively difficult to do. Our crit damage is currently 106 less than our strength, which isn't too bad, it's not the end of the world. Now if we currently look at our power stone, as you can see it's obviously giving us a lot of crit damage, which is helping. However, you can also take a look at your stats tuning, and I've put all of my tuning points into crit damage of course to balance out the imbalance. However, let's say for instance we go into this and we clear all of our points and we put them all into something like strength. We'll soon see the damage that this has done. So now we have 1536 strength and 1176 crit damage, which is obviously a much bigger difference. So the difference between the two is now 360, which is obviously substantially more. So if we do a little damage test, we do 555k, I could have seen that wrong. 557, okay, around about 555k let's say. And now we go back into our stats tuning, clear everything and put everything back to crit damage. That should now display in our Skyblock menu as a much closer figure. Yeah, so we're back to like a, what was it, 111? I can't even remember, just over 100 difference. I think it was 106. But we now deal slightly more damage. I mean, it's not massive, but say for instance if you're using a different power stone, or you're in a situation where there is like a huge imbalance between the crit damage and the strength, then these little adjustments are going to make a massive difference. And as I said before, using the Hurtful Power Stone might not always be the best scenario. Of course, this is completely dependent on your setup. For example, when you're using a Terminator, very few people are able to actually use a really good damaging Power Stone, purely because if you don't use something like Fortuitous that gives you a ton of crit chance and bonus attack speed, then you're basically never going to crit hit because the Terminator divides your crit chance by 4, and in order to actually bring that back up to 100, you're going to need to do something with your power stones. I think I said Fortuitous gives bonus attack speed, which it doesn't, but it does give you a lot of crit chance. Now, another power stone to look at, for me in this situation, it might even be better to use something like Silky. So this doesn't give us any strength at all, but it does give us a ton of crit damage. It gives us more crit damage than Hurtful does. Which means there's going to be an imbalance again, but maybe we can sort that out. So if we change over to our Silky Power Stone, and then we take a look at what that has done to our stats, we now have 1,229 strength and 1,427 crit damage. So now the imbalance is the other way. We have less strength and crit damage. But that's fine because we still have our tuning points into crit damage. If we clear our points and put them all back into strength, that should now actually make that much closer. Let's see, so 1,354 strength and 1,308 crit damage, which means that we've now gone the other way. Which means we can actually balance this out, so the crit damage and the strength is perfect, and in theory that will maximise damage. So if we go into our stats tuning, and we can just literally adjust it little bit by little bit. So now we have balanced it out. So we now have 1,330 strength and 1,330 crit damage. Now in theory this should do more damage than before, considering our values are exactly the same. However, something you also do have to consider is certain power stones provide more of a buff in general than others, basically meaning that they are higher tier power stones. Which means that just because you've picked a power stone and you've balanced your crit damage and strength doesn't mean that it's going to do more damage than if they were slightly less balanced, but higher figures. Which is actually what happened right here. As you can see, we're actually doing, I mean, it is slightly inconsistent, but our damage is flicking between 545 and 558 or 559, which is actually lower than it was before, when our stats weren't quite balanced, but with a higher tier power stone. So it's actually really difficult to actually determine what is going to be better without trying. And honestly, I could sit here all day going through different scenarios, although it's going to be very difficult for it, like everything to apply to yourself, considering everyone's going to have different armor sets at different stages with different stats and different levels, and there's so many things to take into consideration that will affect how much damage you do anyway, that you've just got to try it out for yourself. Now, something else to mention is some of these power stones are not cheap at all. You need 9 of them. Hurtful is one of the best power stones in terms of damage on the game. And let's just go in the middle and say that each Magma Urchin is 3.5 mil, and of course you need 9 of these. Meaning that it's going to cost you around about 31 to 32 mil to actually get this power stone, which for some players is quite a lot of coins. Now, your strength and crit damage doesn't always have to be exactly the same, but what I'm trying to say is the closer you make it to them balancing, the better your damage is going to be, and in terms of just getting those little bit of extra damaging figures up, it's definitely worth doing for the little amount of time that it will take. Anyway, I think that will just about conclude today's video. Now, I know most people will know about this. Some newer players may be confused as to how this works, and it may just help. I don't know if it will or not, but hopefully it does. Anyway, if you did enjoy today's video, make sure you do leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one.
With the